Hey guys, Cliff Gray here with Flat Tops Wilderness Guides and True Hunts. Today we're making a video on riding and horseback mountain hunting. Okay, so we're gonna go over some basic safety things, all the gear involved, and then we're gonna go over a little actual riding technique for when you're out there on the trail. I hope you guys find it helpful, and I hope it kind of reduces your anxiety about horses in the mountains. And if you're about to go on a horseback hunt, I think you guys will value it a lot. Horses are something for you guys to enjoy on this type of hunt. So I think it'll be good for you guys to have just a little bit of safety knowledge and some info on how to ride them properly. So the first thing I'm going to talk about when it comes to the horses, guys, and it's going to touch on just safety around horses. And it's going to sound a little woo-woo, but I think everybody who hasn't been around horses, they need to realize that horses are not a super intelligent animal. Compared to your dog or cat, they're on a totally different spectrum of stupidity. But the thing about them is they're very trainable, okay? And so that's why they're utilized, and they always have been by humans. But the thing you gotta realize is they depend on the herd mentality a lot, okay? And when you're going on a mountain hunt and you're going to spend a fair amount of time around horses, you got to realize that the horse views you really as a part of the herd, okay? And this sounds ridiculous, but you're going to be amazed how much a horse is going to pick up on your mood, the anxiety that you produce, the stress that you have. Horses pick up on that in a crazy fashion, all right? So like right here, Seymour and Romeo, they're dead gentle. I'd let my 3-year-old kid ride either one of them. But if you enter their herd and all of a sudden you're like that, you can see they're gonna shiver. They're gonna pick up on the anxiety, and it can kind of be long lasting. So when you're around horses in the mountains, you want to try to reduce that. Try to be calm and realize you're entering their world, and any mood that you have is really going to shift to those horses. You'll be amazed at how much they pick up on. So that's just a little tip for you. And the other thing is during these hunts and when you're up in the mountains, I mean, most outfitters and guides have very gentle horses. You're going to have very little problems. There's not going to be blow-ups and these bad stories you hear about. But when things happen, there's a bear on the trail or a moose, and it creates anxiety for everybody, including the horses, your best bet is to try to be calm, because the horses pick up on that. If they're nervous and you get nervous, it's like momentum. And when it comes to horses, you don't want that momentum, all right? It's hard for people that are new to being around them, but you gotta kind of try to slow that down, and the best way to do that is try to be calm in situations that introduce a little anxiety to the herd. All right, so that's the end of the woo-woo part. We're gonna go directly to some actual safety rules and then talk to you about gear. All right, guys, so the next thing I'm going to go over with you is I'm going to go over general ground safety with horses, all right? So I've got Seymour here and Romeo, and I'll show you a few things that are important for you. And these are just basics, right? When you're on a mountain hunt, if you're up hunting out of wall tents, you're going to be exposed to horses quite a bit when they're just tied up like this. And a lot of times it's going to be in the dark. You're going to be moving around them in the dark just because of the nature of hunting when you're coming back into camp, when you're leaving in the morning. And so what you're going to find is even really docile horses, they're a little more attuned to things in the dark. So all this matters even more then. So I'll show you a couple main things. One thing about horses is when you approach them, you want to make sure that they know you're there, okay? So a lot of times when I approach a horse, I try to kind of angle into them at the shoulder. Okay, they can see you here. It's very easy for them to see you here as you approach. All right, even from quartering into them like this, they're going to react a lot softer to you. The alternative to that, which you want to try to avoid, is back in here. It's kind of a horse you can't see as well back here. So if you approach a horse from the back, you can see it's making Seymour a little nervous. Okay, same deal. If you quarter into them right here, all right, they're going to be a little more nervous. All right. If you have to do that because of the way they're tied up, just try to, as you approach, try to put your hand on them if anything, okay? As long as you're close to a horse and they kind of feel you, a gentle horse, they generally know what's going on. They know you're human, and they're not worried about it. So that's one of the tricks. And then another thing about it is a lot of people, when they talk about ground safety with horses, they talk about basically, you know, this back rib backwards, okay? So it is true that the rear end of a horse is deadly, okay? One kick and a horse can kill you with their rear end. There's no doubt about that. But really where that's gonna happen is when you're in this zone, okay? You're like an arm length off their hip, okay? If you're making noise here, you know, you scare them, or just for whatever reason they're aggressive horse, if they kick you from this distance, it is problematic, okay? So this is a danger zone, all right? When you're in here, it's not necessarily safe. They can still kind of stomp you, you know, purposely or not purposely, but you know, you're a lot safer here, okay? And then of course, you're safer in here where they can't do either, all right? So don't be like crazy afraid of the rear end. A lot of people project that out there when they're talking about ground safety, but the reality is in a mountain hunt, you're gonna be near a horse's ass a fair amount. So know how to be safe around it, all right? And that means, you know, not making scaring a horse from this distance, right? If you're gonna be near their butt, make sure they know you're there. If you can put a hand on there so they know, that's a big safety factor, okay? So that's the rear end of a horse. The other thing I'll say is that the reality is an aggressive horse, or one that's scared, his front end is almost as dangerous as the rear end. It really is. I think for 99.999% of mountain hunts, really neither of these are gonna apply. You're gonna have horses that are dead gentle, but particularly the front end, it's usually an aggressive horse that'll use their front end. But realize, if you know there is a situation where the horse is scared, they may do that. If a horse starts lifting their front end, as somebody who's a novice around horses, you just need to get away from them, okay? That's not your problem, but you should view that very much as an aggressive posture by the horse. So if the horse is, I'm not talking about a horse picking his foot up, because a horse, a lot of times, a broke horse, you get next to him, he'll lift his foot up like this because he's used to having his feet dug out, but that's not an aggressive thing. An aggressive thing is when he's almost trying to get you with his front feet. You need to stay away from that, and really, it's very rare that's going to happen, but if you do see that, you need to create distance from them. Some other just ground things to think about, guys, is that when horses are tied up like this, and they're in the mountains, they're going to be on a rail sometimes or tied up to trees, don't go under the horse here, okay? Right? Particularly at nighttime when they're a little more sensitive, but all the time, don't go under the horse's neck like this, okay? It's really dangerous because a lot of times it'll scare them and they'll pick their head up, and there's a couple things that can happen. One, they can just hit you when they pick their head up, but the other thing is that rope can get under your jaw, under your arm or whatever, and you'd be amazed the amount of power a horse can create by just lifting his head. So it's very dangerous to move under the horse's neck like this, okay? And so that's one big safety thing to think about. And then also just their head in general. You know, be careful about them swinging their head into you or whatever. It's a big, massive, powerful animal, and just a head toss, and it could just be they're playing around or whatever, but just be conscientious. It can do a little damage. All right, guys, so a couple more safety things, and these 3 safety things are items that I think are actually more likely for you to deal with than just like an aggressive horse or a violent horse or something. That's going to be pretty damn rare on a mountain hunt, and that's really on the outfitter guide to avoid. But the 3 things I'm going to talk about is, first, I'm going to talk about what I call crossfire between horses. Kind of hitting back on the herd mentality thing, is most of an outfitter's string of horses and mules, they're all going to know each other, and they're all going to they kind of have a pecking order, and some of them don't like other ones. So I could take Romeo, who's perfectly gentle. I'd trust him with my life, and if I tie up Maynard, the mule, right next to him, and I'm just the new guide, and I don't realize that Romeo hates the asshole Maynard the mule, all of a sudden Romeo might try to put Maynard in his place. So you got to realize that if that happens and you happen to be in between the two horses, you might get caught in the crossfire, and that can actually be a fairly dangerous situation. So just be conscientious of that. You know, probably when horses are getting moved around and tied up next to each other, you want to kind of let that, as the hunter, you kind of want to let that process settle down before you get yourself near the horses, okay? And just realize that if two horses are acting combative, you don't want to be between them, all right? So that's one that you might see. The other thing you might see, and it just happens, there's a lot of variables in the mountains. You'll find that, you know, people talk about fight or flight. Generally, horses are going to depend on flight. So they really dislike entrapment, right? So if your reins, you know, let's say you dismount the horse for a quick shot or something, and your reins end up on the ground, and that horse puts his foot through the reins and now he's entrapped himself. Even a very gentle horse can have a pretty frantic reaction to that. And your best bet in those situations is you don't want to create the momentum of more anxiety for the horse. So don't run up to the horse and try to grab his leg or grab the reins. What's going to happen is he's going to be more flighty, and the situation can get worse. They can get themselves in deeper shit. So in those situations, generally what you want to do is try to stay calm, let the horse himself get calm, and a lot of times they'll realize, like, okay, I'm stuck. And then if they're still and they're taking a breath, then the guide or outfitter can help them. If it just happens to be you there, then you can very carefully try to help them. And the reality is the safest way to get a horse out of entrapment, even if it destroys gear, is to have a knife and to cut the rope, cut the rein or whatever. That's generally going to be a lot safer than going in there and trying to grab a horse's foot or something like that. As a hunter and a novice to this, you should really never be doing that. Okay, and a matter of fact, entrapment scenarios with the horse, generally you should rely on the guide and guys with experience to deal with it. But it's something for you to realize can happen. That's an uncontrolled environment, so those things can happen. The other one that you guys should realize is horses at night and when it's dark, either at night when you're coming back to camp, when the guides are feeding the horses, in the morning when you're saddling, is your headlamp can cause issues for a horse, right? So if you're walking up to the horses that are all strung up, you don't want to be shining that lamp all over them, because they've got their night vision goggles on, right? So now you're popping them in and out of night vision, and it scares them, okay? And you can cause issues, and you can cause the whole string to get a little anxiety. So the best thing is to have like a low red lamp, or just try to talk to them a little bit as you approach. Hopefully the guides are already working on them a little bit, but just be careful where you're shining that headlamp. It's really, people don't realize it when it's up on their head because they're not seeing it from a distance, but you shine that thing around and it's real erratic. The other thing is, try to avoid shining your headlamp right into their eyes. They find it really agitating in the morning, and it'll create some anxiety for them. So anyways, those are just a couple more safety rules that are very specific to mountain hunting, but they're the more likely issues to arise.